We've talked about Russell Wilson, the trade, probably the worst trade ever, at least so far. There's going to be others, and we might even be able to point right to Carolina. The Denver Broncos are going to eat 38 million bucks that they're going to have to pay to Russell Wilson for $1.2 million signed with the Pittsburgh Steelers. Not such a bad deal for Pittsburgh, right? It opens up that opportunity. You know, everybody was trying to speculate, where's Russell Wilson going to really go, right? I mean, there's a lot of different places that he could go. If Minnesota loses, Kirk Cousins because of money, maybe he goes to Minnesota. Maybe he goes to Atlanta. Maybe he goes to a lot of these different places. But you can understand for $1.2 million why, if you're Pittsburgh, even at 36, 37, 38 years old, whatever he is right now, John, he's probably got something left in the tank. And he could have a pretty interesting, I think he went through long nights on Friday going through everything with the team. And the next thing you know, they signed him up and they said, done deal. There's another one out there. Baker Mayfield just signed. Last year, he was playing for some ridiculously low amount for the Buccaneers. Had probably one of his best years, John. He had, what did he have? 28 touchdowns and 10 interceptions. That's not bad. 64% completion. That's not so bad. And here's a guy now that just signed a 3-year, $100 million deal. Who's getting the best deal right now in terms of the fans? Is it the fans of Pittsburgh? Is it the fans of Tampa? I'll throw in Mac Jones because that one's just crazy. Mac Jones, John, when he came out in 2021, he was the 15th pick. He's now playing underneath the number 1 pick. And the trade, it was a big barn burner of a trade. They traded a 6th-round pick to be able to get Mac Jones down there to Jacksonville, down there playing behind Trevor. So I don't know. It just shows you how many misses there are, John, and how difficult it is in the NFL to find the right quarterbacks for the right teams. But what do you think about what's going on? And is there anybody that you're watching close? Is it Kirk Cousins, or who are you looking at right now?
Well, you and I had talked, Pete, about a whole bunch of this stuff. Kenny Pickett looks like he's going to be out in Pittsburgh. I don't think they're just bringing Russell in to tutor him. They're bringing Russell in to play. And Pickett, they've pretty much given up on that guy, it seems. And they may have given up on him the same way the Bears may or may not give up on Justin Fields, Pete. I think both those players are better than the offensive coordinators that have tried to direct their play. I'm not positive that you agree with me on that, but man, I haven't seen much out of Pittsburgh, and certainly I didn't see crap out of Chicago in terms of the way they developed Justin Fields. But I will say that Mac Jones, that one is a surprise, Pete, even though we both probably thought, he's worn out his welcome, even though the coach is now gone because Belichick is out. They hate to admit that kind of defeat, but, he was on a championship team, Pete, down there in Bama, and just never really showed it in the pros.
No, and it's too bad. And they showed the value that they put him at with the 6th round. When you consider the fact he was the 15th pick in the draft, and now you're getting a 6th rounder, and we're only talking about 3 years ago. That's somebody who's saying, you know what, we really missed out. I don't know if you remember this, John, but one of the things that was a little bit odd from Belichick was when he took his defensive coordinator and moved him over to offensive coordinator and tried to work it out that way with Patricia, who ended up going to Detroit, then coming back. But that was always an interesting move, but I don't know that it worked. And to your point, I think you're right. I think these offensive coordinators sometimes just aren't what they need to be for the players that they've got. I think the world of Justin Fields, by the way. I'm one of the guys who buys into the fact that he's actually the right guy for Chicago. And will he stay? So that's where we'll jump next, John. So right now, Chicago's got the first pick in the draft because of that wonderful Carolina trade that's just as bad as Russell Wilson down there with Young. So that one's kind of interesting. They also have pick number 9. So what makes that whole thing even more interesting is they can do some trading, John. And I think with some of the trades that they put up there, I mean, here's a great example of how much this is going to bring in terms of number 1 pick, because a lot of teams right now need a quarterback, and they've got to get in the right spot. And most of these teams seem to think Caleb Williams is the guy, right? Whether you and I think so or not, that's who they're all going for. So Arizona's got the 4th pick in the draft. Now, they would flip picks. So Chicago then gets the 4th pick and they still have the 9th pick. Then they've got the 2025 first round pick. And then they've got 2024, a 3rd round pick. So they're starting to amass something so similar, John, in a lot of ways to what Houston did and how they just built this team just out of the draft last year and how incredibly fast that can happen. I think if the Bears coaching staff is pretty decent, they can make something like that happen. Here was the best of them all, though. So Atlanta, if they trade, John, they give them the 8th pick. They've already got the 9th pick. They give them a 2025 first rounder, a 2024 second and third rounder, and a 2025 second rounder. That's the kind of trade that could make the Chicago Bears something very, very close to what we've seen, not just in down there with the Texans, but maybe even something that's building a team that looks something like San Francisco or some of these other unbelievable teams, John, because when you get those kind of picks and now you've got money to spend and the cap went up, we talked about that last week. There's a lot of reasons. If I'm a Bears fan out there, I would get pretty daggone excited about what could happen with this first round pick.
Yeah, they could do a lot. And it just depends, if people believe that they'd be willing to trade down or if they're just going to take Caleb Williams instead and blah, blah, blah. I think there's a lot of chess being played and a lot of money, because it's always money with the Chicago Bears. And one of the things, about that Mac Jones trade, Pete, they basically got a bag of balls for the guy, right?
Yeah.
So Bryce Young, Bama. Mac Jones, Bama. Who is the last really big player to come out and light things up in Bama? There have been a few. Jalen Hurts and the guy who followed him up, Pete, Tua.
Yeah.
And both of them are big, strong guys. Bryce was not that. Bryce is slightly built. I don't think he's built for the NFL kind of punishment that these quarterbacks take, even though they protect them, as some of the quarterbacks like Terry Bradshaw would say, yeah, that put a skirt on him. There's a lot to be said about the hits that guys like Bradshaw or Marino took, or some of the guys you played with, Pete, down in Tampa or, Minnesota, Seattle, the Raiders. A lot of these other quarterbacks took tremendous shots. They don't take the same shots now, but if you're 180 pounds, you're really not in a good spot when some 240 pounders coming down on you, whether it's a linebacker or a 265-pound edge rusher or whatever it is. Jalen Hurts, he can handle it. Obviously, Stroud, because he's Ohio State, so they're used to being pounded, because what do? They run the ball, and then he throws some. And that'll be interesting to see. If Marvin Harrison Jr., Pete, if he's got a Bears jersey on, that's going to be a really good day. And I'm sure he's hoping he's not drafted by the Bears, except for the fact that his old quarterback would be pitching him the ball. Well, but he's already been a pro for 3 years, so he wasn't really throwing a lot of balls to Marvin Harrison, Pete, at Ohio State. But this is his 4th year as a pro, Justin Fields. And I think he's due, and hopefully they have a good coordinator for him, Pete, so then you could plug in those picks that you say that they'll have so many of and grab some of the top talent in the draft, because it's pretty deep this year.
Yeah, I would say the last thing I'd say on the sports side of things or whatever, you and I both played, we both understand the game, and there are some quarterbacks out there that are system quarterbacks, right? I mean, the system of Alabama, it used to be the system of USC. You can't hardly name a quarterback who had success at the next level from USC. It's really hard to find names like that. But they were great teams, and they had great players all around them, running backs, tight ends, receivers, offensive line, everything, very much like what Alabama has created now. So the difficult thing, I think, for these general managers is trying to figure out, is this guy good because of the system he's in, or is this guy good because he's that good? And that's where I think these swings and misses, you're seeing more and more of that, because there are a lot of system quarterbacks out there. And that's what's really difficult, but that's why they've got the job of GM. They have to make that decision. And if they're wrong, they should be fired.